Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My fiancé cheated on me with my own mother just days before our wedding. But what I did shocked everyone. My name is Gabrielle, and I am 28 years old. Right now, I am standing at the altar of St. Mary's Cathedral wearing the most beautiful wedding dress I have ever seen, surrounded by 200 guests who have no idea what is about to happen. The white silk feels heavy against my skin, and the cathedral's stained glass windows cast colorful shadows across the marble floor. My bouquet of white roses trembles slightly in my hands, but not from nerves about marriage. I am trembling because in exactly 24 hours, my entire world crumbled into pieces. My father stands beside me, his arm linked with mine, his face stern but supportive. He knows what I know now. He is the only one who does. In the front row, my mother sits perfectly composed in her navy blue dress, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, as if she is the picture of a proud mother. Next to me, my fiancé adjusts his tie nervously, flashing that charming smile that once made my heart skip beats. Now it makes my stomach turn. The organ music swells as guests whisper among themselves, admiring the decorations my mother insisted on choosing. White lilies are everywhere, exactly as she wanted. The same flowers she mentioned loving in her diary entries about him. About them together. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in English literature from Columbia University. I work as a senior editor at Morrison & Associates Publishing, one of the most prestigious publishing houses in Manhattan. I have built a life I am proud of, a career that matters, relationships I treasure, or at least I thought I had. My father is Pastor Thomas Williams, respected throughout our community for his integrity and wisdom. Ironically, he raised me to value honesty above all else. My fiancé comes from the prominent Blackwell family. Old money, connections, the kind of background that looks perfect on paper and in wedding announcements. We are all Black Americans, and for years I believed we shared the same values. 3 years ago, when he proposed during intermission at Lincoln Center while we watched Swan Lake, I thought I was living a fairy tale. The spotlight hit the stage as he knelt with a 3-carat diamond ring, and everyone in our section turned to watch. It was magical, perfect, everything I had dreamed of since I was a little girl. He was Julian Blackwell, handsome and assured, and I was certain the future was ours. The wedding planning started immediately. My mother, Elaine, threw herself into every detail with an intensity that should have been my first warning. She insisted on choosing the venue, the flowers, the menu, even my dress. When I suggested alternatives, she would get this look in her eyes, desperate, almost panicked, and say, "Sweetheart, trust me, I know what is best." I thought she was just being an overprotective mother living vicariously through my big day. Now I understand she was planning the wedding where she would watch the man she was sleeping with marry her daughter. The pianist begins the processional, and I take my first step down the aisle. Each footstep echoes in the vast cathedral, and I can feel 200 pairs of eyes on me. Some guests smile and wave subtly. Others wipe away tears, thinking they are witnessing a beautiful love story. They have no idea they are about to witness something entirely different. My bouquet contains a small surprise tucked between the roses, a few pages from my mother's diary. The evidence that shattered my world yesterday afternoon. The pages where she detailed every intimate moment with Julian, every lie they told me, every plan they made to continue their affair after today. As I walk toward the altar, I am not the naive woman who believed in perfect love and happy endings. I am a woman who discovered that sometimes the people you trust most are capable of the deepest betrayals. And sometimes the only way to reclaim your dignity is to refuse to be a victim of their lies. The wedding march continues, and with each step, I am walking toward the moment when I will show everyone exactly who I really am. 3 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I woke up every morning in my cozy apartment on the Upper West Side, walked to work at Morrison & Associates, where I edited manuscripts that would become bestsellers, and came home to plan the wedding of my dreams with the man I thought was my soulmate. My daily routine was predictable and comfortable. Coffee at 7, a quick scan of industry news, then the subway to my office where I spent hours immersed in stories about other people's lives. I specialized in contemporary fiction, particularly novels about relationships and family dynamics. The irony is not lost on me now. I was an expert at spotting plot holes and character inconsistencies in fiction, but completely blind to them in my own life. Julian worked at Sterling Martinez & Associates, one of Manhattan's top law firms, handling corporate mergers and acquisitions. He pulled in a six-figure salary that allowed us to plan the kind of wedding that gets featured in magazines. We had been together for 3 years, living separately but spending most nights together, talking about buying a house in Connecticut once we were married. The engagement had been everything I ever dreamed of. I can still see the theater lights catching the ring like a small star as he asked me to marry him before a breathless audience. My mother cried harder than I did that night. She hugged Julian so tightly I had to laugh and pull her away, joking about how she was acting like she was the one getting engaged. She insisted we celebrate at her favorite restaurant downtown, the one with intimate candlelit tables and a wine list she practically knew by heart. She ordered a bottle that cost more than most people's rent, saying nothing was too good for her future son-in-law. The wedding planning consumed our lives for months. Every weekend meant appointments, dress fittings, cake tastings, venue tours, meetings with florists. My mother appointed herself head coordinator, creating detailed spreadsheets and timelines that rivaled corporate project management systems. She had opinions about everything, from the shade of white for my dress to the specific variety of roses for my bouquet. When I suggested having the ceremony at my father's church instead of the expensive cathedral she had chosen, she practically had a panic attack. "Sweetheart, the cathedral has much better acoustics for the music, and the architecture is so much more photogenic. This is your one special day." She always had an answer. Her certainty made me surrender small choices until they did not feel like mine at all. Julian seemed oddly uninvolved for someone planning his own wedding. When I asked his opinion about table arrangements or menu choices, he would shrug and say, "Whatever makes you and your mother happy." I thought he was being considerate, letting the women handle the traditionally feminine aspects of wedding planning. Now I see he was letting my mother plan their fantasy wedding. Work became my refuge from the wedding chaos. At Morrison & Associates, I felt competent and valued. My boss frequently complimented my editorial instincts, and authors requested me for their projects. I was building something entirely mine, separate from being someone's daughter or future wife. But even at work, the wedding followed me. My mother would call daily with updates and questions. "The florist needs to know if you prefer baby's breath or eucalyptus in the centerpieces. The caterer is asking about dietary restrictions for Julian's extended family." Always urgent, always needing immediate decisions. Looking back, I should have questioned why my mother knew so much about Julian's family's preferences, why she had his cousin's phone number memorized, why she always knew exactly which wine he preferred. The first time I noticed something strange, I dismissed it as wedding stress. It was a Thursday evening in early spring, about 2 months before the wedding. I stopped by my mother's house to drop off the final guest count and found Julian's car in her driveway. In the kitchen, they stood closer than seemed necessary, both holding glasses of wine and laughing at some private joke. My mother's cheeks were flushed, and there was a sparkle in her eyes I had not seen in years. "Oh, sweetheart," she said quickly, stepping back. "We were just going over the seating chart. Julian had such wonderful suggestions about where to place his business associates." Julian kissed my cheek and said, "Your mother has incredible attention to detail. I was just telling her how lucky you are to have someone so invested in making your day perfect." They seemed to have an entire conversation with their eyes before my mother bustled to the refrigerator. "Let me get you some wine, honey. We have a beautiful bottle from that vineyard upstate." Julian picked it out. He said, "It is exactly what you would love." It was perfect. It was also from a small vineyard I had mentioned during a weekend trip months earlier, something I had never told my mother. "How did you know about that place?" I asked Julian. He glanced at my mother before answering. "You mentioned it last month when we were talking about honeymoon destinations." I did not remember that conversation, but wedding planning had become a blur. That was my first mistake, choosing to trust instead of question. The incidents became more frequent. I would call my mother and hear masculine laughter in the background before she would quickly explain that my father was watching something funny on television. But my father was usually at the church at those times. One Saturday afternoon, I arrived at my mother's house unexpectedly to borrow serving dishes and found her disheveled in a way I had never seen. Hair mussed, lipstick smudged, silk robe at 3 in the afternoon. "Gabrielle, I was not expecting you," she said, pulling the robe tighter. "I called 20 minutes ago," I replied. "You said to come over." "Did I?" "Oh yes, of course. I was just taking a nap." But the coffee table held 2 wine glasses, both recently used, and the air held a lingering scent of expensive cologne that was not my father's. Were you expecting company? I asked. No, sweetheart. Just me here enjoying a quiet afternoon. She collected the glasses, her hands trembling slightly. I helped gather the dishes, but something felt fundamentally wrong. My mother was acting like someone with something to hide, and I could not imagine what she would hide from me. 2 weeks later, at lunch with Julian, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and smiled, not the polite smile he used with clients, but the intimate one I thought was reserved for me. Work? I asked. Just your mother confirming tomorrow's appointment with the photographer, he said, putting the phone face down. I had spoken to the photographer that morning and moved the appointment to next week. When I mentioned this, he looked confused for a moment, then recovered. Oh, she must be talking about the backup photographer. You know how thorough she is about contingencies. We had never discussed a backup photographer. The thin explanations piled up like clutter. 3 weeks before the wedding, I decided to surprise my mother with lunch from her favorite Greek place. I used my key to let myself in. The air held the same expensive cologne, and a men's suit jacket draped over a dining chair, charcoal gray, well-tailored, the kind Julian wore. I found my mother in the kitchen, frantically tidying up. Gabrielle, what are you doing here? She asked, almost panicked. I brought lunch, I said slowly, taking in 2 warm coffee cups in the sink, 2 plates with crumbs from an intimate brunch, a half-empty bottle of wine with 2 glasses close by. The table was set for 2 with her good china. A single red rose lay across a placemat. The newspaper was open to the arts section, which my mother never read, but Julian always did. Mom, whose jacket is that in the dining room? I asked. She paled. Oh, that is your father's. He must have left it there this morning before church. My father was conducting a wedding rehearsal across town at that exact moment. The jacket was too modern and too fitted for his conservative taste. That evening, I mentioned the jacket to my father over dinner. Jacket? He asked, genuinely confused. What jacket? My mother stood to clear dishes that were still full of food. Oh, that jacket, my father said carefully. I borrowed it from someone at church for photos next week. I wanted to look more contemporary. But my father had never cared about looking contemporary, and he was at least 40 pounds heavier than the owner of that jacket. Over the next few days, I noticed how my mother's face lit up whenever Julian called, how she always seemed to know his schedule better than I did, how she had started wearing a different, more sensual perfume. When I mentioned that my mother seemed stressed, Julian offered to help. Maybe I should stop by and help with some vendor calls. I have more flexibility this week. I thought it was kind. It was opportunity. One Tuesday evening, I arrived at Julian's apartment with Thai takeout. He was on the phone in his bedroom with the door closed, speaking in hushed tones. When he emerged, he was startled to see me. How long have you been here? About 20 minutes. I brought dinner. He said he was not hungry and might be coming down with something. He stepped back when I reached to feel his forehead, saying, I do not want to get you sick. On the counter sat a wine glass with a deep burgundy lipstick print, a color I do not wear. Must be from the cleaning lady, he said. His cleaner is an older woman who does not wear makeup and certainly does not drink on the job. The next evening, my call went straight to voicemail. An hour later, he answered breathless. Sorry, I was at the gym and left my phone in the locker. Which gym? I asked. Your usual place closes at 6 on Wednesdays. He paused. I tried that new place downtown with late hours. The gym he named had closed months earlier. On Friday, I stopped by his office with coffee and pastries. His assistant said he had left early for a personal appointment. When I called, he answered after several rings. I had to run an errand for my mother. Family stuff. His mother lives in Florida. When I suggested an early dinner, he declined. I am pretty far uptown. That evening, his car was in his garage. Saturday morning, I used my key to bring bagels and the newspaper. His apartment was quiet, his bedroom door closed. When he opened it, he was wearing only a towel and blocking my view. I am feeling pretty sick again. Maybe you should give me some space. For the first time, he did not invite me into his bedroom. As I left, confusion hardened into suspicion. 2 days before the wedding, I went to my mother's house to collect documents for the ceremony. The marriage license, the rings, and the family Bible. My mother was not home, but I had a key. The documents were in her bedroom safe behind a painting. On her nightstand sat a small leather journal I had never seen, next to her glasses and a water glass. The cover was expensive, the kind of journal someone gives as a romantic gift. I knew I should not open it. I opened it anyway. The first page was dated 3 months ago, exactly when the strange incidents began. March 15th, my mother had written. He brought me flowers today. White tulips, my favorite, though I never told him that. We talked for hours about literature, about life, about dreams we have never shared with anyone else. I feel like I am waking up after years of sleepwalking. My blood ran cold. The timing, the intimacy, the knowing. Everything pointed to one person. I flipped to the next entry. March 22nd. The guilt is eating me alive, but I cannot stop thinking about him. When he kissed me today, I felt more alive than I have in 20 years of marriage. We both know this is wrong, but neither of us seems able to stop. He says he has never felt this way about anyone. That what he has with Gabrielle is comfortable, but not passionate. I should tell him to stay away, but I am too selfish. I want to feel wanted again. The journal fell from my hands. My mother was having an affair with my fiancé. The man I was supposed to marry in 2 days had been sleeping with my mother for months. With trembling hands, I picked up the journal and kept reading, each entry more devastating than the last. April 5th. We made love in my bed today while Gabrielle was at work and her father was at the church. Afterward, he held me and said he wished things were different, that he wished he had met me first. I read entry after entry, documenting locations where they met, lies they told, and plans to continue after my wedding. May 10th. We have started planning how to maintain our relationship after the wedding. He will have legitimate reasons to visit often. Family dinners, holidays, helping with home repairs. Gabrielle will never suspect because she trusts us both completely. The final entry was dated yesterday, June 20th. Tomorrow is the wedding. He came over this morning for what we agreed would be our last time together before the ceremony. We both cried afterward, holding each other like teenagers, saying goodbye before college. He promised that after a respectable honeymoon period, we would find a way to be together again. I feel like I am attending my daughter's funeral instead of her wedding. But I cannot give him up. I will not give him up. I left my mother's house with the journal clutched in my hands and checked into a Marriott downtown under my maiden name. I could not go home to my apartment, too many memories. I could not go to my father's, not yet. I needed space to think. In that hotel room, I read the journal 3 more times. There was no ambiguity. My first instinct was to call and scream. But as I sat on the edge of the bed, shock crystallized into something harder. They had planned this betrayal methodically. This was not a lapse in judgment. It was a campaign. They deserved a calculated response. I began to plan. I called my office and took a personal day. I went to a print shop and made copies of the most damning journal pages, sealed them in an envelope, and stored them in the hotel safe. Next, I called the photographer and requested a surprise slideshow at the reception. Family photos and messages from those who could not attend. He was delighted. I was meticulous. I embedded photographs of my mother's journal pages among the images. Then I called my father. I did not tell him over the phone. I asked him to meet me at the hotel that evening because I needed to discuss something important about the ceremony. When he arrived, I handed him the journal. I watched confusion drain into disbelief and then devastation as he read his wife's careful script. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "Since yesterday afternoon," I said. We sat in silence for several minutes. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to expose them publicly in front of everyone who thinks they are good, moral people." My father, who had preached forgiveness and turning the other cheek for 30 years, nodded slowly. "They made their choices," he said. "They can live with the consequences." We planned the revelation carefully. He would conduct the ceremony as usual until the vows. Then I would address the congregation. "Are you sure?" he asked as he prepared to leave. "Once you do this, there is no going back." "They made that choice for me," I replied. "I am just refusing to be a victim of their lies." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. For the first time since finding the journal, I felt a measure of control. The morning of my wedding, I woke at 6 with absolute clarity. No jitters, no butterflies, no last-minute doubts about hair or dress. Just a calm determination to see the plan through. I ordered room service, fresh fruit, yogurt, and coffee, and reviewed my speech one final time. 3 minutes. Enough to say everything before anyone could stop me. At 9, my bridesmaids arrived to get ready. 3 women I had known since college, excited to be part of what they believed was the happiest day of my life. I smiled and laughed as they helped me into my dress, applied my makeup, arranged my hair in the elaborate updo my mother had insisted upon. You look radiant, my maid of honor said, fastening my grandmother's pearls. I have never seen you so calm. The photographer arrived at 10 to capture the pre-ceremony moments. I posed for the traditional shots, putting on shoes, holding my bouquet, looking pensively out the window. All the images that are supposed to document a bride's anticipation and joy. Instead, they documented my preparation for truth. At 11:30, my father arrived to escort me to the cathedral. The moment he saw me, his composure cracked slightly. "You do not have to do this," he said softly, taking my hands. "We can call it off right now. Tell everyone you are sick or that you changed your mind." "I need to do this," I said, straightening his tie. "They planned their betrayal. I get to plan my response." In the limousine, I tucked the copied journal pages into my bouquet, securing them with ribbon. My something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, and something true. The cathedral looked exactly as my mother had envisioned. White lilies, candles flickering along the aisle, soft classical music filling the soaring space. 200 guests filled the pews, dressed in their finest, chattering about the beautiful ceremony they were about to witness. I watched through the partially open doors as my mother took her seat in the front row, navy dress perfect, handkerchief ready. She played her role flawlessly. Julian stood at the altar in his tailored tuxedo, adjusting his cuff links. From a distance, he looked like every woman's dream groom. 5 minutes, whispered the coordinator. Are you ready? I looked in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back at me looked beautiful, composed, ready for anything. I looked like a bride about to have the wedding of her dreams. Instead, I was about to give 200 people a story they would never forget. Last chance to change your mind, my father murmured as the music shifted. I have never been more certain of anything, I said. The doors opened, the congregation rose, and 200 faces turned toward me. Faces filled with expectation and joy. In the front row, my mother pressed her handkerchief to her eyes. At the altar, Julian smiled that charming smile that once felt like safety. I took my first step down the aisle. With each step, the weight of the hidden pages steadied me. The wedding march played, and guests smiled and waved, some wiping away tears. They believed they were witnessing a beautiful moment. What they were about to witness was a reckoning. I reached the altar and took my place beside Julian. He leaned over and whispered, "You look absolutely beautiful." His voice was warm, as if he had compartmentalized his betrayal from this moment. My father began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls in holy matrimony." He moved through the prayers and readings with practiced grace. When he reached the section about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of honesty, he glanced at me. It was time. "Before we proceed with the vows," my father said, his voice solemn, "Gabrielle has something she would like to share." A hush fell over the cathedral. I turned to face the congregation, bouquet steady. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "I know many of you traveled long distances to celebrate what you believed would be the happiest day of my life." I paused. Unfortunately, I discovered something 2 days ago that changes everything. I reached into my bouquet and withdrew the journal pages, unfolding them carefully. My mother has been keeping a detailed record of her 3-month affair with my fiancé. The silence was absolute. Julian went white, then red, then white again. "Gabrielle, what are you doing?" he whispered. I ignored him and read. "March 15th, I read aloud. "He brought me flowers today. White tulips, my favorite. We talked for hours about literature, about life, about dreams we have never shared with anyone else." My mother half rose from her seat, her face a mask of horror. "Gabrielle, stop this immediately." I continued. "April 5th. We made love in my bed today while Gabrielle was at work and her father was at the church. Afterward, he held me and said he wished things were different, that he wished he had met me first." Gasps erupted. People turned to stare at my mother and at Julian. Shock, disgust, and disbelief rippled through the cathedral. Julian grabbed my arm. "You are making a mistake. Let me explain." I pulled away and read the final entry. June 20th. "Tomorrow is the wedding. He promised that after a respectable honeymoon period, we would find a way to be together again. I feel like I am attending my daughter's funeral instead of her wedding." The cathedral erupted into chaos, voices rising, phones appearing, people standing. Julian's mother shouted, "This is impossible." My mother collapsed back into the pew, sobbing. "They plan to continue their affair throughout my marriage," I announced over the noise. "This journal documents their betrayal in my mother's own handwriting." I set the pages on the altar and faced Julian. Did you really think I was too foolish to figure it out? Too trusting to notice the signs? Too weak to do anything about it? He opened his mouth, but no words came. He watched his life implode in real time. I turned to the congregation. The chaos settled into a horrified silence. I could have handled this privately. I could have quietly called off the wedding and let them save face. But they chose to document their betrayal and plan a future of deception. They chose to make me an unknowing participant in their game. I choose truth. I walked down the aisle, my dress trailing behind me like a queen's train. Everyone who thought they were celebrating a beautiful love story deserves to know they were enabling a cruel deception. Gabrielle, please, my mother cried, finding her voice. I can explain. I understand perfectly, I said, cutting her off. You betrayed your daughter, your marriage, and every value you claim to represent. He betrayed our relationship and everyone who believed in him. Most importantly, I understand that I deserve better than both of you. I turned to my father. Thank you for supporting me. He nodded, eyes filled with pride and sadness. I walked out into the afternoon sun. Behind me, the cathedral roared, arguments, accusations, and the frantic sounds of people choosing sides. On the steps, my best friend reached me first. Are you okay? Where will you go? I am going to be fine, I told her, and I meant it. I am going to be better than fine. Within hours, the story spread across social media. The carefully curated reputations of both my mother and Julian began to crumble. The wedding that was supposed to mark the beginning of my perfect life became the moment I chose to value myself over everyone else's comfort. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be a victim of other people's selfishness. And for the first time in my adult life, I was free to discover who I really was when I was not trying to please people who did not deserve my devotion. 6 months later, I was living in a sunny apartment in Portland, Oregon, 2,000 miles away from the wreckage of my former life. I had taken a senior editor position at a small but respected publishing house specializing in contemporary women's fiction. Stories about resilience, transformation, and hard-won strength. My new life was simple and deeply satisfying. I worked with authors who wrote about complicated heroines making difficult choices. I lived alone and discovered I genuinely enjoyed my own company. My apartment had large windows, hardwood floors, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. I furnished it entirely according to my own taste. The first 3 months were challenging. The story of my wedding revelation followed me online, making dating impossible and interviews awkward. But eventually, people stopped recognizing me as that woman from the video, and I built a reputation based on my work rather than my personal drama. My father visited twice and looked healthier and more at peace than I had seen him in years. He filed for divorce from my mother a week after the wedding, citing irreconcilable differences and betrayal of marital vows. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. He started seeing a kind widow from his congregation, a woman who appreciated his integrity rather than exploiting it. I should thank you, he told me during his second visit as we sat in my favorite coffee shop overlooking the river. You gave me permission to admit my marriage had made me miserable for years. I was so focused on the idea that good people work through everything that I never asked whether I deserved to be happy. I received exactly 3 attempts at communication from my mother in 6 months. The first was a 10-page letter filled with justifications and requests for forgiveness that felt more about her guilt than my healing. I read it once and threw it away. The second was a voicemail on my birthday that I deleted before it finished. The third was a package with family photos and jewelry she thought I might want, along with a note saying she understood my anger and hoped I could forgive her someday. I donated the jewelry to charity and kept one photo. Me and my father at my college graduation, both of us beaming with uncomplicated joy. Julian attempted contact more frequently. He called, texted, showed up at my old apartment, even asked mutual friends to intercede. The messages all followed the same pattern: apologies, explanations about how the affair just happened, anger when I did not respond, then bargaining about working it out. His final message, 4 months after the wedding, was a rambling email about how he had made the biggest mistake of his life and would do anything to win me back. He claimed he ended things with my mother and started therapy. I read the entire message and blocked his email without responding. He did not deserve my forgiveness or my attention. He deserved to be forgotten. The most surprising part of my new life was how little I missed either of them. I had expected to feel sad or angry most of the time. Instead, I felt relieved. The constant low-level anxiety I had carried throughout the engagement, the sense of performing a role, disappeared. I no longer had to be the perfect daughter or the ideal fiancé. I could just be Gabrielle, deciding what I wanted without anyone else's script. 1 year after my wedding that was not, I stood in front of 300 women at the Portland Convention Center delivering a keynote titled, Choosing Truth Over Comfort. Why Self-Respect is Never Selfish. The engagement came after I published an essay in a national magazine about recognizing betrayal and refusing to be a victim. They wanted someone to talk about making difficult choices in the face of personal crisis. A year ago, I told the audience, I thought my life was perfect. I had a successful career, a beautiful wedding planned, and what I believed was a loving family supporting me. I also had a fiancé who was having an affair with my mother, and I was too trusting to see it. The room was silent. When I discovered the truth 2 days before my wedding, I had a choice. I could handle it privately and protect their reputations. Or I could choose messy, painful honesty that would force everyone to confront reality. I chose truth, and it was the most liberating choice of my life. I spent 45 minutes sharing what I had learned about self-respect, about the difference between kindness and enabling, about the courage it takes to disappoint people who do not have your best interests at heart. The response was immediate and overwhelming. A standing ovation, and then a line of women eager to share their own stories. After the event, I drove home to the apartment I had built on my own terms. No compromises, no committee decisions, no performing. I had plants I chose because I liked them, books arranged my way, and food that reflected my actual tastes. I had started dating again 3 months earlier. Carefully, selectively, with clear boundaries. The man I was seeing taught literature at Portland State University. He appreciated my independence and never suggested I was too intense for knowing my worth. My career was thriving, too. I had been promoted twice and was considering launching a literary consulting business. I had begun writing a book, not a memoir of victimhood, but a practical guide for women who find themselves in similar situations. My relationship with my father had never been stronger. He remarried 6 months ago to the widow from his congregation, and their happiness was a joy to witness. He called me the morning after his wedding to say how proud he was, that my choice to stand up for myself gave him permission to do the same. As for my mother and Julian, I occasionally heard updates from mutual acquaintances. Their affair lasted exactly 3 weeks after my revelation. Reality was less appealing than fantasy. My mother moved to Florida to live near her sister, unable to face the consequences at home. Julian left his law firm and moved to Chicago, supposedly to start fresh, but more likely to escape the reputation he earned. Neither succeeded in rebuilding the lives they risked everything to chase. The affair that seemed worth all that deception withered under scrutiny, leaving them alone with the outcomes of their choices. I felt neither satisfaction nor sympathy. They became irrelevant to my story the moment I chose to value myself over their comfort. One quiet evening, I sat by my window with a cup of tea, the river a silver ribbon beyond the city lights. It struck me that my revenge had never been about destroying them. It was about refusing to be destroyed by them. My revenge was this life, free, authentic, and entirely my own. My revenge was discovering that I am stronger, more interesting, and more capable than I ever knew when I was trying to be perfect for people who did not deserve my perfection. The woman who stood at that altar a year ago, devastated and betrayed, has become someone who will never again accept less than she deserves. And that, at last, is the only ending that matters. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.